Fragment 4Q204 sits inside the Shrine of the Book at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The parchment measures 9.4 centimeters wide, sealed behind UV-filtered glass at a controlled 50% humidity. The public reaches it at the display case, and no further. The conservation vault beyond is restricted. What this fragment describes is a mountain somewhere in the west, 4 chambers carved inside it, and the dead still conscious inside them. Banned, condemned, called apocryphal. The Book of Enoch was stripped from the biblical canon in the 4th century. Church councils declared it uninspired. Scribes stopped copying it. For over 1,000 years, it effectively vanished from Western theological memory. Then, in 1947, Bedouin shepherds near the Dead Sea pulled clay jars from a cave. Inside those jars were Aramaic fragments that changed everything. Carbon dating and paleographic analysis confirmed those fragments were copied no later than 200 BCE. The Book of Enoch was not a medieval forgery. It was older than the New Testament by at least 2 centuries. And buried inside it is something that has received almost no serious public attention. One specific section, a single passage in what scholars call Chapter 22, contains the only pre-canonical map of the afterlife ever recorded in a Jewish or proto-Christian text. Not a metaphor, not a vision requiring interpretation, a structural description. Chambers, dimensions, populations, judicial assignments. In the next several minutes, you will see exactly what Enoch recorded inside that mountain, what modern consciousness research and near-death testimony have confirmed about the same geography, and why this particular map was the first thing targeted for removal. If suppressed biblical history moves you, subscribe now. Every week this channel surfaces what was removed, the manuscripts, the translations, the evidence that never made it into Sunday morning. Because what Enoch describes in that mountain does not stay in the ancient world. It reaches forward, all the way to today. The source is 1 Enoch, verses 1 and 2 of the 22nd division. The manuscript tradition runs through the Ge'ez, the classical Ethiopic language, preserved in codices held at the British Library and the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. The translation that remains the scholarly standard was produced by R. H. Charles and published by Oxford University Press in 1912. Charles worked directly from the oldest available Ge'ez witnesses and cross-referenced them against the Greek fragments recovered before Qumran was even discovered. What Charles translated from those verses is this: Enoch is taken westward by the angel Raphael. They arrive at a mountain. The mountain is hollow, and inside it are 4 separate cavities, distinct, separated, assigned. The Aramaic tradition that underlies portions of this text uses the phrase Arba'a Halalim, 4 hollowed cavities, not chambers in the architectural sense we might imagine. The root halal in Aramaic carries the meaning of something pierced through, emptied out from within, a void created by removal, not by construction. Enoch is not describing rooms someone built. He is describing spaces that were made by taking something away. That distinction matters enormously because it shapes what these cavities are for. Now consider the moment Enoch is standing at that mountain. He is writing, or dictating, or transmitting, in a world that has no tradition of underground architectural surveying. The ancient Near East mapped cities, borders, agricultural land. It did not produce technical descriptions of subterranean spatial division. There is no Sumerian text, no Egyptian papyrus, no Ugaritic tablet that attempts what Enoch attempts here. He had no professional vocabulary for underground architecture. He had no surveying tradition for cavities below ground. Yet he produces a map with 4 distinct zones, each assigned a different population, each operating under a different set of conditions. That precision has a parallel. 2 of them, in fact, from sources separated from Enoch by more than 2,000 years. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, records the account of the rich man and Lazarus. 2 locations, a chasm between them. One side of comfort, one side of torment. The chasm is not decorative. It is structural. It enforces a separation that cannot be crossed. That is not metaphor. That is architecture. And it matches the spatial logic of what Enoch mapped. The second parallel comes from the book of Revelation, chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. Under an altar, note the spatial language, under, souls cry out. They are told to wait. They are given white robes. They are conscious, vocal, and in a state of expectation. They are not dissolved. They are not dormant. They are located somewhere specific, and they are still petitioning. 2 texts, 2 different centuries of composition, 2 independent witnesses to the same spatial structure Enoch described first. And the structure is not random. This is the detail that Charles flagged in his 1912 commentary and that most readers pass over. The 4 chambers in Enoch's account are not assigned by proximity or geography. They are assigned by judicial order. Each soul goes to a specific cavity based on a verdict. The righteous in one place, the martyred in another, the wicked who were not punished in life in a third, and the wicked who received punishment before death in a fourth. A classification system, precise, differentiated, administered. One of those chambers holds souls that are not at rest. They are not waiting quietly. Enoch records something coming from inside that cavity that no ancient writer would have had a reason to invent, and that modern near-death testimony has now placed back on the record. And this is where it gets disturbing. There is a fragment sitting inside the Schoyen collection in Oslo, Norway, manuscript 4Q204, pulled from Cave 4 at Qumran. It contains a passage that most translators have quietly moved past without comment, because what it records is not supposed to be possible. Dr. Michael Knibb of King's College London translated this text in 1978. His Oxford edition remains the standard. And in the passage drawn from what we know as the 22nd chapter of 1 Enoch, verses 5 through 7, Knibb renders a voice coming from inside the mountain. Not a memory of a voice still speaking. The Ge'ez original uses the verb yetzawak, present tense continuous. He cries out. Not he cried out. Not he once called. He cries out. Ongoing, unceasing, active right now in the grammar of the text. The subject of that verb is Abel, the first man murdered in recorded human history. Abel died, by the most conservative biblical chronology, roughly 6,000 years ago. And Enoch's text, written long before the Common Era, records his voice as still transmitting, still petitioning. The wound has not closed. The cry has not stopped. That alone should give you pause. But here is the impossible knowledge beat that no one addresses directly. Enoch had no legal framework for this. No ancient Near Eastern tradition of his era described the dead as active litigants before a divine court. The surrounding cultures, Mesopotamian, Canaanite, Egyptian, described the dead as shadows, shades, diminished echoes, passive and silent, waiting to be forgotten. Enoch describes the opposite, a specific individual, named, with a specific complaint, in continuous legal petition. That is not mythology. That is a deposition. Now move forward roughly 700 years from Enoch's composition. A separate author, writing what we call the Book of Revelation, records a scene in the 6th chapter, verses 9 and 10. Martyrs beneath an altar, crying out, asking how long before their blood is avenged. The Greek verb used there is ekroxon, they cry out. Present urgency, same tense logic, Same legal posture, same structure. 2 documents, 7 centuries apart, no editorial conference between them, and both record the dead not as silent, but as speaking, petitioning, and awaiting a specific legal response from above. Dr. Nibb's translation makes the weight of this impossible to dismiss. Abel's cry in 4Q204 is not a poetic flourish. The Ge'ez grammar is precise, yet sawak is not metaphor. It is a verb form reserved for ongoing, unresolved action. The ancient scribes who copied this text across centuries into the Ethiopian Ge'ez codices knew exactly what tense they were preserving. They did not smooth it into past tense. They left it active. The dead are not silent. That is the testimony of the oldest surviving manuscripts tradition on the subject. They are in active legal petition before the throne. Abel's case is still open. The martyrs of Revelation echo his exact posture. The mechanism is the same across 700 years of separate witness. But the text does not treat all the dead equally. Enoch records 4 distinct chambers inside that hollow mountain. The martyrs occupy 1, and the righteous, those who died without violence, without injustice, without an open case, they occupy something entirely different, something the martyrs do not have access to. The text calls it by a specific name, and what it describes inside that chamber is the detail that changes everything. The Ethiopian Ge'ez Codex, held by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, preserves a phrase in the 22nd chapter of 1 Enoch, verse 9, that R.H. Charles translated in his 1912 Oxford Critical Edition. Charles was meticulous. His apparatus notes every variant, and the phrase he renders there, the one describing the chamber of the righteous, is not approximated. It is precise. Mayat Berhan, water of light. Not water beside light, not water reflecting light. The Ge'ez construction places these 2 words in direct apposition. The water itself is luminous. It is a spring inside the mountain, architecturally placed, structurally distinct from the other 3 chambers Enoch describes. And it is described not as a reward waiting to be given, but as a present condition already inhabited by the righteous dead. Charles renders it plainly: a bright spring of water inside the hollow mountain, where the souls of the righteous rest. Now here is what makes this an impossible knowledge problem. No ancient Near Eastern tradition, not Sumerian, not Akkadian, not Canaanite, not Egyptian, describes underground luminous water as a resting place for the righteous dead. The underworld traditions of every surrounding culture describe darkness, dust, silence. The Mesopotamian Kur is a land of no return, where the dead eat clay and wear feathers. The Egyptian Duat contains rivers, yes, but they are navigated by the living soul in a boat, not inhabited. Enoch describes something with no parallel: a fixed, luminous spring, a specific geographic feature inside a specific chamber, recorded with architectural precision. He had no template for this, no cultural source to borrow from. Yet he records it with the specificity of someone who was shown it. In December of 2001, The Lancet, one of the most rigorously peer-reviewed medical journals on Earth, published a study by Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist at Rhine State Hospital in Arnhem. The study followed 344 patients who had been resuscitated after clinical cardiac death. 62 of those patients reported near-death experiences, and across those accounts, the recurring features were consistent. Light. Not light from a source. Light as an environment. Peace, described as a physical sensation. And crucially, relational memory fully intact. They recognized people. They experienced connection. They reported being somewhere that felt like arrival, not passage. The ancients called it a bright spring. Modern survivors call it a luminous field. Mayat Burhan in a 6th century Ge'ez manuscript. A luminous environment, reported by 62 cardiac patients in a peer-reviewed 2001 clinical study. Same phenomenon, different century. Charles preserved the phrase in 1912. Van Lommel published the data in 2001. Neither was trying to confirm the other. The gap between them is the confirmation. The chamber of the righteous is not a vague promise. Enoch records it as a specific location with a specific quality, luminous water, that modern testimony, gathered under clinical conditions, has now independently described. The righteous dead are not in petition. They are not crying out. They are at rest, in a place the text describes with architectural detail that no ancient writer could have fabricated from the cultural materials available to them. But Enoch's record of this chamber does not end with what is inside it. The final layer he preserved, the most consequential and the most suppressed, is what reaches those chambers from outside, what the living send across the boundary, and whether it arrives. The 1978 Oxford edition of First Enoch, translated by Dr. Michael Knibb, contains a passage drawn from the 22nd chapter, verses 12 and 13, preserved in the Ethiopian Ge'ez tradition. Most readers who encounter this text focus on the chambers, on the geography, on the division of souls. They miss what the final verses of that chapter actually record, because what they record is a mechanism, not a description. The Ge'ez word is tzelot. Knibb translates it as intercession, but tzelot does not mean a quiet personal prayer. In the Ge'ez legal and liturgical tradition, tzelot carries the weight of formal petition. It is the word used when a plaintiff addresses a court, when a case is brought before authority with the expectation of a binding response. Tzelot is not sentiment. It is standing, legal, active, directional standing. And what Enoch records in those verses is that tzelot, intercession from the living, reaches the chambers. The dead are not insulated from the living. The boundary is permeable in a specific direction. Earthly petition crosses it. Earthly injustice crosses it. Unresolved wrong, carried in the cry of a living person, arrives inside the mountain. That is not a vague spiritual metaphor. Enoch records it as a structural feature of the afterlife geography he was shown. The chambers receive. The living send. The mechanism is explicit in the text. Now, here is the impossible knowledge problem this creates. No ancient cosmology of Enoch's era described a two-way relationship between the living and the dead that was governed by legal petition. The surrounding traditions described the living making offerings to the dead, food, water, goods, to keep the dead placated. That is a transaction. What Enoch describes is different. The living sending legal petition on behalf of justice, and that petition having standing inside the chambers. That is a court, not a transaction. In 2014, Dr. Stuart Hameroff, anesthesiologist and director of the Center for Consciousness Studies at the University of Arizona, co-authored work with physicist Sir Roger Penrose on quantum coherence and consciousness. Hameroff's position, stated publicly in multiple academic forums that year, is that quantum information states, the patterns that constitute conscious experience, do not terminate at biological death. They persist. They are not erased. The information is conserved. If information states persist beyond biological termination, then the boundary between the living and the dead is not a wall. It is a membrane. And membranes, by definition, allow passage in specific conditions. Tzelot, legal intercession, is exactly the kind of directional, structured, intentional information transfer that a membrane model would permit. The ancients called it intercession. Modern consciousness research calls it quantum information persistence. Enoch recorded the mechanism in a manuscript fragment that sat in K4 at Qumran for 2,000 years before anyone translated it carefully enough to notice what it actually said. Prayers, cross. Unresolved injustices, cross. The petition of the living arrives at the chambers of the dead. The text is explicit. Nib's translation is precise. The Ge'ez is unambiguous. And this is the layer that the removal of 1st Enoch from the canonical record buried most completely. Not the geography of Sheol, not the division of the dead, the mechanism. The instruction that the living and the dead are still in contact, that what you send matters, that it arrives, that the chambers are not sealed against you. The suppression did not destroy the map. It hid the key that tells you what to do with it. Fragment 4Q204 sits in Jerusalem right now. Photographed, cataloged, assigned a shelf reference by the Israel Antiquities Authority. Their digital archive has made it searchable since 2012, publicly, without credentials, without permission from any church or council. You can find it today. The suppression did not erase the testimony. It only delayed it. And beneath the western horizon Enoch described with such precision, 4 chambers remain ordered, still occupied, still holding the righteous, the sinners, the martyrs, the neutral dead. The final judgment that would empty them has not come, which means the mechanism is still running, right now, as you watch this. If what the dead still hear, and what reaches them, is the architecture you came here to find, subscribe. There is more buried.